You are listening to the US of NA by Nation Beer, a series of stories about the people and places from every corner of the country who are helping fuel the NA beer movement. If you like this episode, please add us to your library in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen. For more great NA stories, including our many beer reviews, visit nationbeer.com. Interested in getting free samples while helping the non-alcoholic movement grow even further? Then consider joining IRL Nation, our new sampler platform pairing great food and beverage brands with great people ready to share them in real life. Join and share through groups and clubs you belong to, or just as a solo sampler. Signing up is quick, easy, and free. Go to nation.beer for more information and to join today. Welcome to the US of NA. I'm your host and chief optimist, John Eggleton. I'm joined for today's episode by Sierra Elaina, CEO of Lehua Brands. For some quick background, we've talked in recent episodes about the two sides of the cannabis beverage category. The hemp-derived side, where beverages with less than 0.3% THC can be sold in most states, usually through beverage stores and many independent retailers, although also through national outlets like Total Wine and more. The other is the more highly regulated, full marijuana plant beverages that are generally sold through state-licensed dispensaries in one of the 24 states where marijuana is recreationally legal. So Lehua is in the latter category, and in our conversation I talked with Sierra about the opportunities and challenges of the category, including how the hemp-derived space has really mainstreamed the idea of drinking beverages infused with THC and CBD. We also talk about the parallels with the non-alcoholic industry and how it all feels like it fits under the same tent or movement, even if not all NA drinkers are cannabis beverage drinkers. Lastly, we talk about what the future might look like once all of the regulatory stuff eventually flushes out. We don't know exactly when you'll be able to sip on a beverage like the brands in the Lehua portfolio at an NBA or NFL game. She talks about the house that Kobe built in LA and when she thinks her beverages will appear there, but eventually it'll happen. Change comes slowly, but with more people using cannabis in all of its forms than they are consuming alcohol, according to recent studies, which is even more true in Generation Z, it really is just a matter of time. Incidentally, Sierra and her team sent me a sampler package of non-infused beverages from their Voila line. In the episode, she calls it their Hero brand, and it's a line of flavored mineral waters with flavors that include lime, pineapple, and strawberry, and my favorite so far, watermelon. Flavors are really subtle with no added sugars, essentially no categories, and really easy to sip on if you get a chance to try some. All right, here's the conversation with Sierra. Sierra Elaina is the CEO of Lehua Brands. They're an award-winning portfolio of cannabis beverages based in King City, California, which is south of Monterey. She has a deep background in the beverage space, weaving between corporate roles in sales, marketing, and executive leadership, in between some of her own entrepreneurial pursuits as well. So we'll let her give a little more background on herself here in a moment. But first, Sierra, welcome to the US of NA.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited. It's my first podcast, so be easy.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. So, as I just mentioned, so you've got a great background in the beverage space, and, you've worked with a mix of brands, both, new brands, emerging brands, some larger brands, and I know you've done some of your own entrepreneurial stuff kind of mixed into that. So we'd love just to hear how you got into the space in the first place, and what excites you about it that has kept you in it.
I think I got into the beverage space. My first, real job, we'll call it, was working for an Anheuser-Busch distributor in Connecticut. It was one of the largest at the time. And so at a distributor, it is such a master's program of how to go to market, right? And so there is where I really got my feet wet. From then, I went on to agency side working for J&B Scotch, which was just a tremendous opportunity. I cannot say it enough. So grateful for that team, and became director of on-premise. I was kind of probably the right person at the right time, had the distributor background so I could speak to distributors when I traveled across the country. It was at that time, J&B Scotch was a priority brand for Shefflin, which became Diageo. Because all the old Scotch drinkers were dying, right? So how are we going to reintroduce this brand to the LDA consumer? So it was a great on-premise program, traveled the country, learned to work closely with media, and then developing business programs or annual business plans across the country with the different distributors. And I got the bug. And from then kind of knew these are my people and this is where I belong. And as you mentioned, I've gone on to work on other great brands within Diageo portfolio, whether it was agency side or directly when I started my own agency or as a consultant for some emerging categories. So cannabis really just made sense to me, for a lot of personal reasons. And that opportunity came, and this job in particular, to combine my two loves, I couldn't ask for a better role.
So you came into Lehua, I believe, as the Chief Revenue Officer in 2022, and then took over as the CEO, I believe, a year later. So tell us about the company, the products, and what have you guys been working on? What are you excited about there?
Wow. So the company is great. I will say that when I first met with them, it was actually the investors who really made me go, wow, I really want to be a part of this. Because they had, as everybody in cannabis, they had just been through so much, right? And when I first met them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I had some of my own ideas of what I wanted to do. But they were so dedicated to this brand. They had just taken over. They are Canadian, so everybody loves Canadians, right? And just very forthcoming, which was refreshing considering some of the stuff I had been through in cannabis. So the line itself was great, but had not stayed relevant with consumers or what was actually happening in the California trade. So when I talk about being in bottles that are heavy and logistically, that's very hard to transport for a distributor. Sugar contents, right? Because I've always said from day one, sugar is a dirty word. And if it's not, it's going to be. Packaging was a concern, but the flavor profiles were there. They need some tweaking. And I think as the evolution of any category, the team that takes you to one level is not necessarily the team that's going to take you to the next. So when I took over as CEO, one of the things was to assemble a team that I felt had the same vision of where we wanted to take this brand. I've always said from day one was let's stabilize California because it is the start of the extinction in 2022. The extinction mode is what I call our era. Let's just stabilize California, clean up, and let's start making our money in other markets. And so was a big cleanup. I'm not going to lie. We're not any different than any other cannabis brand, and changing that portfolio. So as you'd mentioned, we had beverages. They had actually also had some vapes that had done well. But again, everything kind of needed to be overhauled and reformulated. So first person is let's get a real formulator in here, a real chef. And Chef Todd, I don't want to speak to his background, but you have probably eaten something he's created, drank something he's created, or he's been a part of that team. So bringing somebody from the outside who understood how to work with emulsions and cannabis was just key. So we went on to do some major switch ups initially, like get that sugar content down. So now we are actually producing no sugar in Canada, some new brands we're going to introduce, and in California. Repackaging, we'll keep the bottles because legacy, some of them, give that bottle a makeover, right? That packaging was all covered up. You couldn't see the beautiful colors that make a great shelf set. Put some real strategy behind these brands. Created new brands. So while all this chaos is happening, we are creating new SKUs, root beer, being the silver medal winner that just won, and refresh a whole new line for us of non-carbonated teas, lemonades, and now some shots. And that actually won gold. We had just launched that in May. And then voila, expanding on the flavors, enhancing the flavors. And that drink in particular, with the 0 carbs, 0 calories, 0 sugar, speaks to a lot of people for a lot of reasons. So, and I think that's the hero brand in our portfolio. And then we re-entered into vapes with a brand called Smoking Section. So it's a premium looking brand with the award-winning extraction oil and team behind it, but the pricing is very moderate. And then into the shot category, we have just launched Live Oro, which is our sleep aid. So made with melatonin and magnesium and black cherry pomegranate. And again, we try to keep natural in our products, and you will continue to see us. We're House of Brands, but we're House of Innovation. So doing all that while I'm cleaning up production things and like early cannabis, I think a lot of people came in gung-ho and there was a lot of over purchasing that was done. And,
Right.
everybody's got stories, but, my job was to come in and really just turn this thing around. And I'm glad to say, while I'm still cleaning up the past, we're moving forward. I think our awards speak for itself, our expansions. And we've got some new flavors that are getting ready to launch in the next 30 days. And I've got a whole new category that I can't speak about yet, but we're really excited. So we can't wait to bring that to market.
Awesome. Well, that all sounds great. And, you mentioned a lot of change, that's happened over the past couple of years in the industry. And it's still obviously it's an interesting time for the overall cannabis beverage space. And especially if you consider as a result of the 2018 Farm Bill that created the hemp-derived side, and we're in this kind of weird time when you have two different factions or sides of the industry that are out there together. Right. In some cases, and some of the conflicts that's caused. At the same time, it's maybe created a little bit more awareness for the category as well. Would just love to hear your thoughts on the opportunities and the challenges that the overall industry finds itself in.
Yeah, I mean, beverages this much, right, of cannabis sales. But this is what I always say. What's the first thing when you go to someone's house? What do they offer you? What would you like to drink, right? You will never be able to, or anytime I think, be able to smoke a vape at the crypto.com or Staples Center or the house that Kobe built. You're never going to be able, but you're going to be able to drink a Voila there in the next 2 years, right? So that's where my mindset is looking forward and what this is going to look like. I want to be at a CVS in the cooler, right? Or at a Vons in the cooler. And that's where I see this going. As far as the hemp-derived drinks, we've looked into it. It's an opportunity. How long that remains an opportunity, I think everybody's, sitting on the sidelines wondering. It's election year. There's a lot going on. Our stance is right now, let's just concentrate on what we do best. And, kudos to everybody else that's going down that path. I don't really have a feeling. My only concern I've always expressed is, are the manufacturing standards there? That's it. And I think that's fair to ask. But I'm not saying no. We are looking at maybe some other routes of, again, speaking of Voila, that was our hero brand I spoke to you about, the mineral water. How great would that be into like a specialty grocery? How great would that be into a hotel or an on-premise? Because it is a consumption beverage. And when I sample that at events, non-infused, I hear all the time, wow, I would just drink this normally. And I like to refer to us as the Perrier of cannabis. I mean, it's that good. And it's guilt-free, and it's low dose, so people have an easy entry to it.
So there's a lot of education, I think, happening right now. And, as people are becoming more aware and becoming more comfortable with it, and it's becoming more mainstream, for lack of a better word, for both the regulated side and the hemp-derived side. And, as I think about, or as we think about the overall non-alcoholic beverage category, and I know you mentioned, the cannabis beverage is a small part of the overall cannabis. That's kind of its own thing, its own industry. Right. But on the beverage side, it seems like there's a lot of parallels with just non-alcoholic drinking, in general. I mean, we've got the athletic brewings of the world out there that have really made it mainstream. They're in, sports arenas. They might be in, I don't know if they're in crypto.com there in Kobe's house. The house that Kobe built, but they should be if they're not. And so, I sort of look at those as being on parallel paths. I mean, is that something that, are you guys benchmarking at all against the overall NA? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I would totally agree with you for a lot of reasons. So personally, I'm not, as much as I have worked on alcohol and spirits my whole life, I don't really drink, so, and I think the younger generation, obviously, that Gen Z is, consuming more cannabis than alcohol, right? Because people are more into a healthier lifestyle. Everybody has that bad night with the tequila, right? That you'll remember for your whole life. I think, I'm older, and my parents' generation, it's nothing to start drinking at 4:00 in the afternoon. And those people are just healthier, making healthier choices, whether it's sugar, drinking, and they're adapting those lifestyles. So I think that while beverage is a small part, and I used to drink O'Doul's back in the day. I've never been a big drinker, and I was fine with the flavor of O'Doul's, Even when I'd be out in clubs when I was wearing 4-inch heels, I mean, I was the girl that's probably drinking a water, and ice water more than anything else. Drinking has just never, everybody's got those horrible hangover stories. It's just nothing that never appealed to me. But while cannabis beverage is about this much, again, a small percentage, it is the one category that is showing growth month over month, while others are on the decline. And I think that says a lot. I think smoking, especially after COVID, whether you believed what, or didn't believe what, but people are very concerned about their lung and health. And so For beverage, again, to me, it's easier consumption, right? The efficacy. You can still, especially with these lower dose drinks, remain social, part of the conversation, part of the occasion. We put them in 4-packs, so just like a craft beer. And, I just think as generations come, you get better and better each time, right? And so I see them on very parallel paths because people, when you see, non-alcoholic bars opening up in New York City, who would ever thought that would be happening? But they are. And total shops dedicated to nothing but serving non-alcoholic wines and beers. I mean, beautiful shops, off-premise locations. So it is a movement for sure.
No, I would definitely agree with you. And, I think that's where, as I think about the industry, I think that's where the hemp-derived side has probably been helpful in that respect. I mean, the non-alcoholic bottle shops that are, in places like New York and everywhere. I mean, we've got 2 of them. I live in Atlanta. We've got 2 of them here. And, they would love to participate, I think, in the broader, cannabis space.
Yeah.
It's obviously regulated based on where you can buy it. And so forth from dispensaries, et cetera, in the states where it's legal. But I think as that expands out, I think most of the people or many of the people in the NA space would look at the cannabis beverage side as being a part of, that same movement as well. So I think there's, a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on, you mentioned, the healthier choices that people are making and, how that's impacting what they're drinking. And there's lots of studies about how Gen Z just is into alcohol. As us older generations were in the past, and what that means, which is somewhat controversial, I guess, in some areas, just based on where you fall on that continuum.
Right.
But no doubt that it's definitely happening, and cannabis is becoming more the substance of choice, for them, whether they're ingesting it in a beverage or in some other way. Although, as you mentioned, it's much more social in a drink, just in terms of our overall culture. Right. Just curious what you guys are hearing from both your customers as well as just distributors and partners that you're working with on this business.
Very much the same. That if you look at the demographics, it is typically the LDA, we'll call legal drinking age or legal consumption age, to 25, 26, right? They're entering, they're easy adapters to it. They get it, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then I find, I live in the South Bay of LA, right? Or right outside. And so I have a lot of I always call it the Manhattan Beach Mom. She's the perfect example of a woman, especially during COVID, that was probably drinking a bottle of wine a night because they were stuck at home and stressed out and da-da-da. And so when I first came to Lehua, it's like, oh, I can't see her. I can't. And I was like, all right, well, first of all, you just drank a bottle of wine, so I'm pretty sure you can. And let me explain this to you. And so as they love the no sugar aspect, again, that is just such a selling point. And the no hangover aspect, is another huge point. So that's just in my inner circle seeing. And then as I travel and do my song and dance across the country, it's the same, whether I'm in Canada or Massachusetts speaking to people, and up there, they're really buying beverages by the case. Like, I don't really hear that as often in California, but because they're 10 milligram low dose markets, they're buying it like an alcohol beer by a 4-pack or a 6-pack. Very normal to hear such things. And I think that, again, I'll go back to that the younger generation, they want plant over pills. They're kind of turned off by big pharma. They could have entered cannabis for a variety of reasons. Myself was originally from my father, really. He had Parkinson's, didn't want to take opioids. So I would bring him edibles while he could still swallow really well. And it just helped with the pain. For me, I've suffered from anxiety and periodic bouts of depression. So cannabis has always helped. And there were times when I've had to be on, prescription meds. And, thankfully that's not an everyday occurrence for me, but cannabis does alleviate for me my anxiety, my depression. It's helped me with a variety of things. And now I'm really into the topicals too for physical pain, so it's just an amazing plant. I think we're just starting to really realize, and like you said, to bring it to mainstream America is what the mission is, right?
No, we just have to get through this transitional time, yes. I guess, when people need to get used to it and comfortable with it, but it's happening. It's definitely happening. And it's always the younger people that usher in the new change. So
usher in change. Yeah.
You gotta love it. So distribution-wise, so you guys are in, is it California and Canada for now, or
Correct,
what is your
Ontario. Right. California and Ontario right now, with hopefully be announcing our next expansion by the end of this month. I'm in final negotiations for that. I've got and then we'll continue our footprint in Canada over the next 90 days. They have this Ontario province has about a 5-month process. You present, they come back and tell you letter of intent to purchase. And so to be on the shelf in the spring, I have to present by the end of October in Ontario. So it's almost very much like operating in a control state in alcohol. Like Virginia is where I'm from. It's a control state. So you have to present to the state or to the Commonwealth, excuse me. And then they determine if they're going to bring you on and such. And that's very much the way it runs up there.
Got it. No, and I know that I believe it's 24 states now where cannabis is recreationally legal. And Ohio is one of those that's been more recent, which happens to be where I'm from.
Oh, okay.
And just I think in the last couple of days, I just saw an interview, or not, it wasn't an interview about cannabis, but at some sort of public event. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, threw his support behind legalizing cannabis in the Commonwealth there. And so it's happening, it's trending, and, more and more states. It's really more of a question of when the federal government will act,
Correct.
Versus each of the states, or at least, a lot of them individually. From a distribution standpoint, are you guys looking at the other states where cannabis is legally or recreationally legal today? And I think of a state like Minnesota, where it seems like they've already got a really good scene, both on the NA side as well as, the cannabis side. So just curious what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So again, coming from a distributor background, it is one of the criteria. Like I have a checklist when I look at my markets. Like I just went to New York City. They're the big market everybody's buzzing about. Great shop. It's so nice to see hope when you walk into a shop. That's the same in Ontario, whereas in California, everybody's a little beat up, So for me right now, yes, I hope this thing goes legal, blah, 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 but I'm also realistic. So when I look at where we're going to go, it's the footprint and where we can manage and the maturity and growth of that market. Do they have a good co-manufacturer, right? Because I'm not going to open facilities. We're going to co-man and be a lean asset, low risk model. That's what's successful. Is there a sales agency there, or do I have to supply my own salesperson? It's like any CPG. Oh, I want to be in California, but can you afford to be in California as a brand? So if I want to go to Massachusetts, what's my co-man look like? What's my go-to-market look like? What's my sales support look like? If we got interstate approval, how great that would be, because the 95 corridor for me makes such sense and is easy for me to manage as far as what else goes besides making a great product. There's all those other things you got to check off. So Michigan being where it is in relation to Ontario makes perfect sense to me. We've got a great co-manufacturer there. Again, checked off all those other boxes I just spoke about. So that's a market that I'm very excited about. And then Massachusetts, I've done a lot of work on. So yeah, it's just distribution, sales, and you got to find a mature co-manufacturer that can keep your brand integrity in place.
No, that makes sense.
I'm very big on manufacturing procedures and,
So last question before we, come back around to just how people can find out more about Lehua. This is a version of a question we've asked all of our guests, which is looking in the future and, where do you see the company? Where do you see the space? So we'll fast forward 5 years, which I know is an eternity,
right.
These days for anything, let alone what we're talking about here. But we'll just say it's 2029. Yep. What do you hope Lehua looks like at that point? And since it is such a regulated environment, what do you hope, for the macro environment at that point?
For Lehua Brands, I hope to be in some big chain groceries. I always say, what's this going to look like on the shelf at CVS? Let's start thinking about what that shelf set looks like. If we've got all of our brand, you will really see that kind of detail. And I think that's because I come from traditional CPG, right? That I'm trying to think of that as we develop this house of brands. And if we were to sell, say, one of the categories to, I don't know, Pepsi-Cola, Southern Wine and Spirits, whomever, what does that do to the rest of the house? So each can still survive on their own, So that goes behind the strategy. As the industry as a whole, as this thing goes legal, and I'm going to put positive vibes out there, I just hope, I think there's a lot of legacy folks that are having a tough time with change. Change is always scary, but this is just the nature of progression in industry, right? So that I hope for them, because they did put so much heart and soul into us, they are the forefathers in this, that they can adapt to the change. I really do. There's some amazing brands, I'll just speak to California, up in Humboldt, that unfortunately, because of the compressions and everything that are happening, that are hanging on by a thread. And that's a shame, because they're the ones who really put all this in motion for the rest of us. So that's what I hope, is that a lot of those legacy brands survive, and that we as an emerging young company just continue down our path of being innovative. Like, I wish I could tell you what I want to tell you, but we've got some really great stuff happening that I don't see any other brands doing right now. We're very fortunate, and I'll bring it full circle, that our investors, who I was just so impressed by when I interviewed, are just in it for the long haul. So I have the benefit of not worrying every month right now, am I going to be able to pay the rent? Like, they have given me that safe space to just do what I do. And we've done it. And so now we're just like, great, 2025 is going to be our year. And we're really excited.
Well, that's great to hear. And hopefully we won't have to wait 5 years to see some exciting things in the overall environment, presidential election year. Hopefully some things start to move. I know I believe there's a meeting in December about the schedule change happening at the federal level, which hopefully can get some things moving forward on that. So hopefully 2025 will be a big year, not only for Lehua, but for the overall industry as well. We'll stay tuned.
Great. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
That's right. Well, great. Well, Sierra, tell us how people can find out more about Lehua brands. And, you talked a lot about the different product lines, I know, or mentioned a lot of them by name, but tell us how we can get more information or find out more about them.
Sure. So in California, we're in over 115 stores, and in Canada, in over 200 stores. But you can always go to lehuabrands.com, and that's Lehua, and brands with an S. There, you're going to find a great brief on every brand we carry, whether it's Olala, which is our sodas. They're made with natural cane sugar. They're all vegan friendly. They're non-GMO. Voila, the hero brand, which is our mineral water I spoke about. We've got Lehua now, our sleep aid, coming out. The Refresh, the gold medal winner, which is, again, all non-carbonated, pure cane sugar. And then the new shots. We meet people, John, wherever they are on their journey. So we have everything from 10 milligram to 100 milligram, because I am from a legacy state. There are people that can handle 100 milligrams, and there are people that can't. So it's like alcohol. You start your journey here, and then you'll continue to dose up. Yeah, and I think it's just a great alcohol alternative, and for those that are sober curious, right? So that's who we are. And like I said, there's 5-6 brands in the house right now, continuing to develop and create new innovative products.
Well, we look forward to the day when we can go to our local Whole Foods or Sprouts, which they've made some moves in the NA space. That may not be a 2025 thing. That might take a little bit longer, but we look forward to the day when it's that available, and the education is there, and the consumer safety guardrails, all that plays out in a way that makes sense for everybody. So
I was drinking O'Doul's back in the 80s.
You were a pioneer. Yeah. You were an NA pioneer.
I'm an OG. And how many great tasting non-alcoholic drinks and beers there are now. Like, again, I was in New York, and I'll wrap this up for you, but I was in New York a couple of weeks ago and out to dinner with friends. And again, I'm not a drinker. So just the impressive non-alcoholic menu that I had a choice from. And I remember thinking, gosh, where have you been for the last 20 years of my life? Because there's always ice water or unsweetened iced tea.
No, it's a fun time to be in the industry for sure. Well, Sierra, again, we really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about Lehua, and we look forward to seeing how those 2025 plans wrap up. And, we'd love to have you back on the show to talk about what's next at that point.
Thank you for having me, John. It was nice to meet you.
Okay. I want to again thank Sierra for taking the time to talk with us. If you've been listening to recent episodes, we've heard various takes on where the industry is headed. But she dropped some good nuggets on things like her team needing to really think through the packaging for the day they'll be on the shelf in the mainstream world, the importance of proximity for distribution, and her references to Lehua as a house of brands was really interesting to us as well. That's our show for this week. We've got a few more coming up before we start to wrap things up for 2024, but in the meantime, Cheers.